The last place I expected my life to fall apart was on a quiet mountain trail, where I had gone to escape the constant pressure of running the historic family art gallery that had consumed every waking hour of my adult life. Just as I reached a peaceful overlook and silenced my thoughts for the first time in months, my satellite phone erupted with an emergency alert from my financial advisor, instantly replacing the calm around me with a chilling feeling that something precious was slipping away. My name is Natalie Brooks, and at 34 years old I believed I had finally earned a few peaceful days after spending nearly a decade rebuilding Brooks Fine Arts into one of the most respected independent galleries in Colorado. Every painting hanging inside those walls represented years of sacrifice, endless nights, and promises I had made to my late grandmother. So hearing my advisor, Daniel Harper, nervously tell me that someone was attempting to secure a massive business loan using my identity made my entire world seem to stop. Daniel struggled to keep his voice steady as he explained that the application had passed every traditional verification step before a newly installed identity security program discovered serious inconsistencies between the live biometric data and the records permanently connected to my account. He quietly admitted that if the software had not completed one final automatic comparison only minutes earlier, hundreds of thousands of dollars would have been released against my gallery without my knowledge, leaving me responsible for a debt I had never approved. I demanded to know who was bold enough to orchestrate something so calculated, expecting to hear the name of an experienced cybercriminal or a sophisticated fraud ring operating across several states. Instead, Daniel hesitated for several painful seconds before revealing that my uncle Victor Brooks and my aunt Linda Brooks were sitting inside his office with an aggressive financial consultant, insisting that I had willingly transferred authority over my business because I was supposedly suffering from severe emotional exhaustion and could no longer manage my own affairs. The words crashed into me harder than the freezing mountain wind, because Victor and Linda had spent years pretending to support my success while quietly criticizing every decision I made behind closed doors, and suddenly every uncomfortable family gathering, every strange question about my finances, and every suspicious compliment took on a terrifying new meaning. Without wasting another second, I told Daniel to freeze every transaction connected to my accounts, refuse every request no matter who threatened him, and prepare every document because I was leaving the mountain immediately to confront the people who had decided my future belonged to them. The drive down the mountain felt endless because every winding road gave my imagination more time to picture strangers placing liens against the gallery my grandmother had built with her own hands nearly 50 years earlier, and every passing mile deepened the painful realization that the greatest danger to everything I loved was not coming from outside my family but from the people who shared my last name. I barely noticed the changing scenery as I raced toward the airport, replaying every conversation I had ever had with Victor and Linda while searching for the moment their hidden resentment had transformed into outright betrayal. By the time my flight landed in Denver, exhaustion had settled into my bones, but anger kept me moving as I rushed straight from the terminal to the headquarters of the private financial firm that managed both my personal accounts and the gallery finances without even stopping to unpack my luggage. Daniel met me inside a secured conference room with a thick stack of files spread neatly across the polished table, and the worried expression on his face told me the situation had grown far more complicated than a simple forgery. The fraudulent application appeared almost flawless because every signature, business record, tax document, and ownership certificate looked authentic enough to deceive nearly anyone who reviewed them. Yet the digital investigation revealed that someone had quietly changed my emergency contact information days before I left for vacation to ensure every warning notification would be redirected somewhere I could never see it. Daniel explained that those changes required high-level employee authorization, meaning the criminals had not only studied my personal life but had also received help from someone working inside the financial institution itself. As we continued examining the electronic records, another disturbing discovery emerged that completely changed the direction of the investigation because the requested loan proceeds were never intended to improve or protect my gallery despite what the official paperwork claimed. The hidden payment instructions showed the money would be transferred through several business accounts before disappearing into a newly established investment company controlled by Victor, proving the entire transaction had been designed to drain my business while leaving me responsible for repaying every dollar. Daniel leaned closer and lowered his voice. After checking that the conference room door remained securely locked because he had uncovered another alarming detail that could not wait until the authorities arrived to investigate the case. According to the automated processing schedule, the fraudulent loan would become legally enforceable within the next 24 hours unless I immediately filed an emergency ownership dispute with the State Commercial Records Office, forcing me to leave the building at once and begin a desperate race against time before my family's carefully planned deception became impossible to reverse. The afternoon traffic seemed determined to trap me behind endless lines of slow-moving vehicles. But I refused to surrender even a single minute because every delay brought the fraudulent paperwork one step closer to becoming a permanent legal burden attached to my gallery. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I silently reminded myself that my grandmother had trusted me to protect her lifelong dream, and I refused to let greed erase the legacy she had spent decades building from nothing. When I finally reached the State Commercial Records Office, I hurried through the historic stone entrance carrying every document Daniel had prepared, determined to stop the fraudulent filing before the automated registration deadline expired later that evening. A veteran records supervisor named Margaret Ellis listened carefully as I explained that someone had forged my authority to secure a business loan. And although she had handled countless ownership disputes throughout her career, the seriousness in her expression revealed she understood this case was unlike anything she normally encountered. Margaret immediately assembled a small review team to compare my identification with the electronic filings already waiting inside the registration system, and every passing minute felt like an unbearable test of patience while government employees carefully verified every signature, ownership certificate, and security record connected to my business. After completing the initial review, she placed an emergency suspension on the pending transaction and handed me a detailed fraud declaration that required my sworn testimony, explaining that the temporary order would freeze all legal action while investigators examined the evidence. As I finished signing the final page before an official state notary, the heavy seal struck the document with a sharp echo that sounded like the first real victory I had experienced since Daniel called me earlier that day from his office. Before I could even thank Margaret for moving so quickly, my phone vibrated with another urgent message from Daniel warning that Victor, Linda, and their financial consultant had returned to the firm demanding immediate approval, insisting that I was emotionally unstable and no longer capable of making responsible business decisions. I rushed back across the city without hesitation, knowing the battle was no longer just about protecting property, because my own relatives had now chosen to destroy my reputation in order to justify stealing everything I had worked for during the past decade. As the towering financial building came into view, I took one slow breath to steady my emotions before walking through the front doors, completely unaware that the confrontation waiting inside would expose secrets far more shocking than simple financial fraud. When I stepped into the grand reception hall, I immediately spotted Victor and Linda standing beside their sharply dressed consultant, Gregory Sloan, speaking with such confidence that anyone watching would have believed they were protecting the family instead of trying to destroy it. Their calm smiles and polished appearance hid the desperation in their eyes, while several employees quietly observed the conversation without realizing they were witnessing an elaborate performance built on deception and carefully rehearsed lies. Victor lowered his voice into the gentle, fatherly tone he always used when he wanted people to trust him, explaining to the senior executive that I had become emotionally overwhelmed after years of managing the gallery alone and had recently begun making irrational decisions that endangered the business. Linda added convincing stories about my supposed anxiety, sleepless nights, and inability to focus, insisting that the family had stepped in only because they loved me too much to watch everything collapse while I refused to accept that I needed help. Gregory smoothly placed a leather portfolio on the executive desk and described the loan as a responsible financial strategy that would strengthen the gallery, carefully avoiding any mention of the hidden accounts where the money was actually meant to disappear. His presentation sounded so polished that several people nearby nodded in agreement, making me realize they had spent weeks preparing every detail of this scheme, including a false story designed to convince everyone that I was no longer capable of protecting my own future. I walked forward before another word could leave their mouths, and the sound of my footsteps echoed across the marble floor, until every conversation inside the lobby came to an abrupt stop as all eyes turned toward me, looking directly at the three people who had betrayed my trust. I calmly introduced myself as the sole legal owner of Brooks Fine Arts before placing copies of the officially recorded fraud suspension on the executive desk and informing everyone that the transaction had already been frozen by the state pending a criminal investigation. The confidence drained from Gregory's face almost instantly, yet he still attempted to threaten the firm with expensive lawsuits if the loan remained blocked, believing fear would force the executives to ignore the growing evidence against him and my relatives. Before anyone could respond, the secure security doors behind the reception area opened and the company's chief security director entered with two financial crime investigators carrying digital evidence that would soon unravel every lie Victor, Linda, and Gregory had worked so hard to construct. The lead investigator placed a secure tablet on the conference table and displayed a detailed timeline showing every unauthorized login, every altered account setting, and every encrypted message exchanged between Gregory and a senior employee who had secretly manipulated the firm's internal security controls. Victor tried to interrupt with another polished explanation, but the investigators calmly revealed that the employee had already confessed to accepting large payments in exchange for disabling fraud alerts and helping create the illusion that I had personally approved the entire transaction. As the evidence continued to unfold, Gregory's confidence disappeared completely because every hidden transfer, deleted message, and financial record had been recovered by the firm's forensic technology team before any of it could be permanently erased. One of the investigators explained that the money was never intended to support the gallery since the funds were scheduled to move through several temporary accounts before disappearing into an overseas investment company that listed Victor as its controlling executive. Victor stared silently at the documents spread across the table while Linda suddenly burst into tears, claiming she had only followed her husband's instructions because she feared they would lose everything if they failed to secure the money. Her desperate attempt to shift responsibility might have earned sympathy under different circumstances, but after listening to them falsely describe me as mentally unstable only moments earlier, I realized their emotions appeared only after the truth left them with nowhere else to hide. The investigators formally ended the meeting by informing everyone that the evidence would be delivered to federal financial crime prosecutors, and uniformed officers escorted Gregory and the corrupt employee from the building while additional legal proceedings were prepared against Victor and Linda for their participation in the conspiracy. I signed every criminal complaint placed before me without hesitation because protecting my grandmother's legacy required choosing justice over family loyalty. And although the decision broke my heart, I knew allowing betrayal to go unchallenged would have destroyed everything she had trusted me to preserve. Several months later, Brooks Fine Arts welcomed visitors once again, without the shadow of lawsuits or fraudulent debt hanging over its future, and I invested in advanced legal protections that made it virtually impossible for anyone to manipulate ownership records or financial accounts ever again. Looking across the restored gallery each morning reminds me that the deepest wounds often come from the people we trust the most, but true strength is found in defending what is right, even when standing alone. And I hope my experience encourages others to safeguard their dreams before someone else's greed places them at risk. My relatives eventually faced the consequences of their actions through the courts, while the financial institution completely overhauled its internal security procedures to prevent another family from experiencing the same nightmare that nearly destroyed my future. I walked away from the entire ordeal with fewer people in my life but far greater peace in my heart because I finally understood that real family is defined by honesty, loyalty, and respect rather than shared blood alone. If my story has taught you anything, let it be that protecting your future is never an act of distrust because preparation can save everything you have worked a lifetime to build when unexpected betrayal appears without warning. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.